Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and welcome back to That Time. And today we're talking about that time when states were independent nations. And we're going to be talking about three today. And the first one is the Republic of Vermont. So way back in colonial America, Vermont was part of the colonies, except it was disputed between New Hampshire and New York, and most Vermonters, I guess we'll call them, they preferred New Hampshire, whereas the King of Great Britain had awarded Vermont to New York. And there were even some Vermonters who wanted to be part of Quebec. That's Quebec for those of you who don't understand French. So when the when Vermont natives helped or Vermonters helped with the American Revolution, they figured they'd get their own, they'd get their own state when they did join. Except the Continental Congress and eventually the U.S. Congress couldn't determine whether it should go to New Hampshire. It was called the New Hampshire Land Grants by Vermonters, or whether the area now known as Vermont would be part of New York. They didn't know what to do with it, because Vermont didn't want to be part of New York, and New York didn't want to let go. And both states claimed Vermont. So Vermont did the next most logical thing. They declared independence. And some tried to get them to join Quebec. Some tried to form their own state. And of course, like I said, the majority declared independence. And this lasted for about 20 years. Now, it was never officially recognized by anyone. But they had good reason, and it sort of was quasi-independent anyway. It was very hard for the U.S. to enforce laws within its own boundaries. So Vermont, in all essence, was actually a de facto nation. Even if they didn't have official recognition, they acted as their own nation and governed themselves until they joined the United States as the 14th state in the mid-1790s. But for about I'd say 13 years they were their own nation. And the next state is the Republic of Hawaii. Or not the Republic of, the Kingdom of Hawaii. There's a difference. So we're going to be talking about the Kingdom, not the Republic, which was a colonial movement that overthrew the Kingdom and then got the territory that was formerly the Kingdom of Hawaii annexed by the United States. I will briefly mention that. So, in the late 1700s, Hawaii kind of... It's very weird the way Hawaiian history works in this era. They were sort of British protectorate / independent. They had some really cool characters like Kamehameha, and I'm not going to say any of the other names because I'm going to butcher them horribly, and I don't want to offend any of the native Hawaiians who may or may not watch this video. But I do want to acknowledge that they were a fully functioning empire. They were a fully functioning kingdom that was relatively successful. Had about 100 years worth of history. There were some peaceful annexations where they took one or two islands somewhat peacefully, but the kingdom really came together when one of the kings from the main island. Again, I don't want to insult anyone by mispronouncing his name. When he won a few battles and took islands in that way. But unfortunately, their time as an independent nation came to an end when the kingdom was overthrown by white American immigrants who wanted to reestablish free trade with the United States and or become a territory and probably eventually a state. This was so significant and so kind of disgraceful that Bill Clinton actually released an official apology for the American role in overthrowing the Kingdom of Hawaii. It wasn't sanctioned by the government, but we kind of just went with it and said, yeah, they got overthrown, so we're going to recognize the actual power in Hawaii. It's a political mess, and in all honesty, you can't really change anything now. Hawaii is a full state of the United States with representation, and they've ratified the Constitution, and from what I can tell, only a small portion actually wants independence again. Though, if if the majority of Hawaiians wanted independence, I don't really see how you can argue they have a bad case for independence. Fun fact, Hawaii is the only state in the United States with a Union Jack on its flag, which may or may not change anytime soon. We don't actually know, but I mean, the flag is a very good design. It looks good, and I'm sorry, it's a good design. And the last one is the most famous independent nation that became a U.S. state. And people from this state will never stop rubbing it in. Texas. I wanted to include the bear flag, the California Republic, but that never actually was really a thing outside of one city. And when I say city, I'm using that very generously. And even then, it only lasted a month, so I'm not going to talk about that. But Texas was a genuine republic that fought and won its independence and got it recognized by the home nation, by the nation they declared independence from, as well as other nations around the world, even if their parent nation eventually retracted recognition of the Republic of Texas. And then the Republic was a front to try and get annexed by the United States. But anyway, so the story of the Republic of Texas goes back to when Mexico gained its independence. They had a lot of frontier in their northern half, essentially what is now the southern border states of the United States. So Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California. This even went all the way up into Colorado, Utah, Nevada, parts of Oregon, Idaho, and Wyoming included, as well as a few bits of Oklahoma and Kansas and Nebraska thrown in, if I'm remembering my geography correctly. So yeah, yeah. Well, they decided to invite settlers, not just from the Mexican core, but also from the United States to settle this area. Now, of course, they wanted these people to become American citizens, not American citizens. They wanted these people to become culturally Mexican. Okay? So they invited Americans in to settle the land and work it and farm it and develop it. they brought with them, now of course there were a few conditions. First, these American immigrants had to become Catholic if they weren't already. They had to renounce ties to the United States and, declare allegiance to Mexico. And they had to, if they owned slaves, they had to give up the practice. Well, that didn't work out too well. Americans remained Americans. There was some interesting mix with the Tejanos who were there already. But overall, they weren't perfectly in harmony. Well, eventually Santa Anna takes over and starts going against the Mexican Constitution, the Constitution of 1824. It was not something Coya y Tejas, what the name of the state in Mexico was called, was in favor of, because they were, well, again, mostly white Americans living in Mexico. So they obviously started fighting back. And actually they did get a significant portion of Tejanos and even Native Americans to fight with them. So it wasn't universally just white Americans fighting against Mexico. There were a lot of Mexicans living in Texas, again, the Tejanos, who were in favor of it. But it wasn't an overwhelming majority or even a majority of Tejanos. But it did show support among the non-white community of Texas. In fact, the flag that flew over the Alamo was the Constitution of 1824 flag, which I don't have here. I've just got the most famous flag of Texas, the only flag of Texas. Well, as we all know, they won their revolution at the Battle of San Jacinto, where they quite literally caught the opposing army sleeping. If you really want to read up into it, it's kind of funny, but it actually makes perfect sense when you look at it from a cultural perspective. It wasn't because the Mexican army was tired or sleepy or lazy or whatever. It's because it was a cultural institution that you take a nap after lunch, or at least relax after lunch. The Texans just took advantage of it. So pretty immediately they recognized that, oh, yeah, we're kind of sitting ducks here. So they continuously begged the United States for inclusion and annexation as a slave state. It took them about 10 years to actually get this, and even then tensions were high. It did lead to the Mexican-American War, where the rest of the desert Southwest and the Southwest United States was transferred. We actually paid Mexico after the war, not just for the lands we took. We gave them back and paid them back. Because we had actually essentially conquered all of Mexico in that war. But I won't get into that. Maybe that'll be another episode of That Time When. But anyway, so Texas was another front to get annexed by the United States and get fair treatment. And that's actually the funny thing about all three of these nations that became U.S. states, is there was a transition period where they were essentially just a lobbying group trying to get annexed by the United States. The Kingdom of Hawaii, not at all. They wanted their independence. They wanted to keep it, and rightfully so, I would say. But when they got overthrown by the people who own Dole fruit nowadays, I think, don't quote me on that, do not ever quote me on that, but Sanford Dole, or was it Sanford Dole? I don't remember. was the president of the Republic of Hawaii, and his only goal was to get Hawaii annexed by the United States. Vermont was done as a means to ensure that they weren't absorbed by New Hampshire or New York. And Texas was, yeah, we don't want to be in Mexico, but the U.S. won't annex us immediately, so I guess we'll be independent. Oh, and that myth about Texas being able to secede if it wants to, no, that's not how that clause works. They're allowed to split into as many as 5 different states without congressional approval. That's what that is. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you have a nice day. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye.